Hello, welcome to Strictly Money at the News Forum, where all voices matter. I'm Saijal Patel. Our seniors are some of the most vulnerable to financial abuse, and not just fraud and scams, but also within families, especially during the transfer of wealth. The level of abuse the elderly face has prompted regulatory changes to help protect them. And to discuss those changes and what it means is Laura Tamblyn Watts. She's CEO of CanAge, Canada's National Seniors Advocacy Organization, and she joins me now. So this is a very important topic, and the number of fraud and scam cases, at least it seems, has escalated. Are you seeing that?
It is escalating, both in real numbers, but also the rapidity, how fast new frauds and scams get to market is also increasing. So we know that there is more money being taken from older people in particular, and it's being more efficient in getting that money out of them.
Wow. So let's talk about these regulatory changes, because one of the changes that came into effect is this development of the trusted contact person. So tell us about that.
It's a mechanism which many financial institutions were already using, and it just makes sense. So imagine your kid is going to school. You need to put an emergency contact if you can't be reached for whatever reason. It's that same basic principle. You and your financial advisor will sit down as part of the Know Your Client process, and they will ask you, is there somebody that we can reach out to in the case of an emergency, in the case we can't get a hold of you, or in the case that we think that there's something wrong? That could be financial abuse, or it could even be a health issue. And most people understand that need, and they're quite willing to do it.
Okay. And can you just clarify, Laura? Does this include bank representatives and financial advisors?
So this is required on
Okay.
the behalf of the investment community. Having said that, many banks are also implementing this as part of an optional process.
Okay. So, but it's up to the individual, the client, too, right? If they want to participate in that, so that's optional.
There are always some people who will say, you know what, my financial information is entirely private to me. I don't want you reaching out. If you can't get a hold of me when I'm hiking in Nepal, okay. And if you can't get a hold of me because you're concerned about some type of abuse or neglect, I'm willing to take that risk. I don't actually want anyone reach out to. Having said that, mostly when you go through the what if circumstances, people think, yes, I do actually have somebody that would be quite useful to have as that.
Yeah. And so it brings me to this point then, Laura, if they can't get a hold of the client, or if they see something suspicious, can they actually freeze their account? And would that direction be under the trusted contact person? Because I can see how that is important, but it can also backfire.
Many people will have a power of attorney for a property type of situation. And it's a little bit different depending on which jurisdiction you're in. But that's somebody that you've chosen to stand in your shoes legally. And they have all of the powers that you would have typically to make decisions like freezing accounts, stopping trades, or withdrawing money. Having said that, one of the big risks we have is when people who are acting as a power of attorney are perhaps misusing that power. Maybe they don't understand it. Maybe they're actually really taking advantage. So it's good to have somebody else to reach out to. A trusted contact person is really only going to be reached out to in the case of emergency. It's not going to be a regular kind of situation. That's important to know. They don't have the ability to provide direction in terms of trades to the advisor. They can only give information.
Okay. So that brings me to that question, because you believe that advisors, the trusted contact person, and the POA or power of attorney should be separate individuals, correct?
Many people won't have more than one person to turn to, but I like the idea of having two separate people if that's available in your life. Again, statistically, about two-thirds of people who are financially abusing another person are those closest. Again, it may be a misunderstanding, maybe an innocent misunderstanding of their role, or maybe not so innocently. So to have somebody outside of that power paradigm can be very useful.
Yeah, I'm very important too. I know just recently, my parents' advisors reached out to me. I am now the trusted contact person, and it was a new process to go through, but I think a very important one. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back, Laura. Stay with us. Welcome back. Laura, I think some of our viewers will be surprised by this. I'm certainly not surprised given the work that I do, but 2/3 of elder abuse, including financial abuse, is perpetrated by family members and friends. Wow, right? Can you give us some examples?
I think of it as a spectrum. So there's the regular person who's trying to do the right thing. They've been given this power of attorney. They don't really know what they're supposed to do. And so they try to simplify. Well, just put all of mom's money into my account and I'll just pay the bills. Of course, you can't do that. In fact, not only is it inappropriate, it can be actually criminal. But that's just a regular person without training, just doing the wrong thing. Then in the middle, there's those hard decisions. Well, my roof needs fixing. And if my mom was mentally capable, I would ask her for money. Maybe I need $50,000 to fix the roof. She would give me that money. I know she'd give me that money. So I'm just going to take that money because I can't ask her because she's mentally incapable. So she may have been able to give you that money, but you can't give it to yourself. And then on the far end, there are people who are really waiting for their inheritance and they're getting impatient and they take the money before the person dies. And that is certainly on the increase.
All right, and that's what we were talking about with the wealth transfer. Important point, considering that there's 1.1 trillion dollars changing hands as we speak, right? I can imagine that this is difficult for many seniors too, because for them it's their family, and they may not have anyone else to lean on, and they might also not be very tech savvy, so they're depending on someone, which also opens them up to being taken advantage of.
When it comes to things like debit cards, tap, 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 $100 each time, and then it can get to online banking. And certainly the financial institutions, whether it be for banking or investments, are encouraging people to do work online. Well, why don't you just set it up for me? And then, I'm having a hard time understanding, oh, well, maybe you just pay the bills. Maybe you could just take over the investments. And that slippery slope happens as opposed to somebody learning how to do it. Credit cards as well, easy to use, really on the internet these days, even again using tap technology. So we know that access to money is very easy for other people. And again, sometimes it's with good intentions and sometimes not so much.
Yeah. So Laura, let's talk about some of the biggest scams that you are seeing, just because you said, it moves so quickly. What are you seeing right now that seniors should be aware of?
There are always scams associated to whatever's in the news. So I can tell you that COVID-19 scams are still alive and well today, and they burst in almost overnight. As we were still trying to understand what COVID was, there was already COVID frauds and scams. We certainly see a lot of the traditional ones, things like tax scams, CRA scams, spoofing scams, where people are sending things that look like their financial institution. And some of them are so good, it's really hard to tell the difference. Increasingly, we're seeing mobile technology. So older adults are now getting smartphones, but text seems like a closer relationship. So lots of package scams, collect your package, pay your duties, and so on. And then there's those interpersonal scams. Of course, many people will know what we call the grandparent
Yeah.
scam.
Yeah.
That's where you show up and you say, "Hi, grandma, hi, grandpa." And they say, "Oh, is that you, Joe?" And they say, "Yes, it's me, Joe." And that involves sending money over the wires. And that's very specific. When we see money being wired, you can really know that that's a red flag. And it typically is to another jurisdiction. And there's almost always another person they pass the phone to, a pretend doctor, a pretend police officer or lawyer that validates this claim. And this will continue on and on.
Wow. We only have about a minute left. So what's your advice? How do seniors protect themselves?
You need to be skeptical, but not paranoid. And so you can take the information in and then always go look up what the real information is. So I may get a link saying this particular delivery is there. You know what? Go online or go into your phone book and call that delivery company and find out separately. If you get something from the CRA, yes, there's some big red flags. You're not paying your taxes in Apple gift cards or something else like that. But you can call the CRA with their registered number. And be very wary of links because they are the beginning to getting your information stolen. You may not even know that, but it's being sold in this black market. And for every one scam that you fall for, your information is being sold 5 to 10 times.
Wow. So if you do get a link, you don't open it, or can you open it?
Do not open the link. Again, if you think it's from your utility company, look up the real number for the utility company and phone them. Don't click
Okay.
the link.
Laura, really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you.
Laura Tamblyn Watts of CanAge. Stay put, because we'll be right back. Welcome back to Strictly Money. More than 125 million US and Canadian citizens over the age of 18 do not have a will. And with the greatest wealth transfer in history underway, it's more important than ever to have an estate plan in place. Because according to my next guest, not doing so is a tragedy in the making and is guaranteed to affect relationships profoundly and irreversibly. Dr. Tom Deans is an intergenerational wealth expert and best-selling author of Willing Wisdom, and he joins me now. Hi, Tom. Great to have you on.
Great to be here.
So, this is a topic that I speak about a lot because I know how important it is. And I have this saying that, when you pass, you leave a legacy, but the one that you don't want to leave is an estate that's a mess. And yet 50% of people are probably going down that path.
Yeah, I think that number is conservative. I think it's probably closer to 65% of Canadians are in a complete disaster waiting to happen. And I don't think people truly understand the magnitude of the chaos and the litigation and the disorganization and heartbreak that they leave behind. So, part of what I'm trying to do is just raise that public consciousness and then flip it around and say, I don't think a lot of Canadians understand really some of the great positives that come out of actually doing an estate plan and communicating that with the people who will be impacted by your decisions. And so I think it's been allowed to be reduced to a really sad, dark, depressing subject. And what I'm trying to say is, are you kidding me? There's a lot of fun and, quite frankly, satisfaction that can come from actually tackling this subject with your family.
Yeah, and I want to get to that, but let's talk about the reasons why people don't get a will, right? I hear they don't need it. I don't need it. The courts will decide, and it's just one less thing that I have to worry about and pay for. The other one that I seem to hear a lot and understand is that when you're doing it, you're really facing the inevitable death, and people just they don't want to think about it. They let alone even want to plan for it or discuss it. How do you get around that?
Yeah, well, I think you're right. I think there's a couple of reasons. I don't know whether this is the right order, but these are a couple of the biggest ones that would capture why most people are reluctant to go forward and plan and execute their estate plan. One is superstition. I don't know if you know this, but there's a lot of people who have never seen a will. They don't know what it is. They just know that it is a kind of a last document that captures our last sentiments and aspirations while we're on the planet. So there's a lot of people who feel like they talk to their family about who they should select as their executor. If they go to a lawyer, have a will drafted, sign a will, bring it home, bring that document into their home. I don't know. There's a lot of people who believe that they're, immediately going to die.
Yeah.
It's great. I mean, can you imagine me arguing that if you actually write a will, sign a will, hold a will, bring it to your home, keep it safe, that you will guaranteed to add 10 years to your life? Like, both are absurd.
Yeah.
The reality is, once you have these documents in place, there is a sense of satisfaction that you have pushed through and actually taken care of business. We are all going to die. There's nothing more certain on the planet. Like, this is not kind of needed. It's you absolutely need it. And when you actually push through that fear and superstition and get the document in place, it is absolutely amazing how great people feel. That's number one. Number two would be, well, I don't want to write a will now because our daughter is expecting a child, or I'm going to sell a business. Something material is unfolding in their lives, so they go, well, I'm just going to wait till that happens, and then I'll write my will. And they kick the can down the road, not for 1 year, but for 10 years or 30 years. Like, there's always stuff that's happening in our lives. What people often don't understand is that there is an easy way to update your will. It's a will is not one and done.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who are going to be watching this and go, well, I have a will, I'm good. Yet your will was written 20 years ago. There's a very good chance that your executor is dead. Or you don't have a relationship with that executor. You would select someone completely different. Listen, in 1968, when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated in Los Angeles, the good news was that he had a will. Bad news was that he had his brother as listed as executor, who was assassinated 5 years early, never updated the will. So this is not just about getting wills done. It's about keeping them up to date and keeping the people who will be impacted by that document up to date, which includes sharing your will with your executor, on your power of attorney, with your power of attorney. There's no sense having these documents squirreled away in a safety deposit box that no one knows about. No one knows how to access it.
Hold your thought. We're going to take a commercial break and we'll come right back. Welcome back. Tom, before the commercial break, you were talking about some of the important points of updating a will, making sure people know where it is, which I think is really important. I want to switch gears because in the book, you write about 7 questions successful families should ask. Now, I won't cover all 7, but I want to mention a few that I thought was really interesting. One was the context of planning for the division of your assets. And does fair mean fair, or does fair mean equal? I think this is a really important one that people mix up. So tell us about that.
Yeah, it really is the question that cuts right to the heart of the matter. And most Canadians are making these decisions really from a real place of confidence. They think that that if we leave the cottage to Mary, because Mary really is the only child that uses it, and that cottage is worth $1 million, then we'll leave $1 million to Larry. And now, is that fair? I mean, is that fair or is that equal? I mean, it's like it's equal. I mean, the cottage is worth $1 million. The other child gets $1 million of cash. The reality is both those assets are going to be treated completely different from an after-tax point of view. I don't want to turn this into a technical answer, but the reality is it's well-intentioned. The reality is someone is going to end up with a large tax bill, especially if that cottage was purchased for $15,000 in 1952. And now there's just a massive capital gains that's going to be triggered on last to die. And so I just think a lot of people are making these really well-intentioned but naive decisions about the division of assets, thinking that they're being equal, thinking that they're being fair, and in reality, they're confusing the two subjects and the two concepts. And so this is really where the role of an advisor can come in and use open conversations in family meetings about how assets will be divided on death, not leaving it to some big giant reveal party called the reading of a will. Usually when people are grieving, very, very few estate plans built on secrecy bring families together. They usually divide families, and it's really preventable, and it's really actually quite easy when people start to rely on their trusted advisors.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because I think a lot of people think, well, a will, that's a lawyer's job, but it's much bigger than that because you have to think about the execution of it. Tom, the other question that you had, again, I thought very interesting. Describe how your parents divided their assets and when you first learned the contents of their will. Interesting perspective. What do you think? What does this achieve?
What I'm getting at there's something called family systems theory. It's the study of family as an organization. And the central tenet of that kind of study of families is that, and this is really broadly understood, that families repeat. we know from studies that if there's a smoker, a parent who smokes, that the children have a higher likelihood of smoking. Families repeat good habits, bad habits. Families that grow up with an entrepreneurial parent, we know studies show that there's a high probability that one or more siblings, children, are going to be entrepreneurs. Like, we know this. And so we have a generation of Canadians, the most affluent generation in the history of this country, baby boomers that are turning 76 this year. And they're the most successful. They've started more businesses than any other prior generation. They were super savers, super investors. They are dying with surplus wealth. And guess what? When they sit down to contemplate their estate plan, remember family systems theory, they are actually designing their estates exactly the way their parents, who had no wealth. There probably was no family disharmony because there was nothing to fight over. There may have been enough money to pay for the funeral, but that's about it. So we have an affluent generation being informed about their estate plan by their own parents' experience. It's not working. Part of my message in the book is that when we create surplus capital, surplus wealth that is going to transition, and it's transition, a conservative number is $205 million will be inherited today in Canada. It's probably closer to $250 million a day, and it will be $250 million a day, $1 trillion over the next 10 years. It is a tsunami of wealth that is transitioning, most of it in the way I just described, without much clearer consideration or being informed by a prior generation.
And I think it's really important to make sure people are prepared. I'm going to bring up your book. Where can people buy it, Tom?
Yeah, they can go directly to the title of the book, willingwisdom.com. Shipping is free. Books ship the same day that orders are received. Don't go to Amazon. You're often going to buy used books that are all marked up. So go straight to the website. It's the best and fastest way to get the book.
Thanks, Tom. Great to have you on.
Great to be here.
Well, that wraps up this edition of Strictly Money. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay well, stay wise, and stay wealthy.